What if I told you that the smallest player in the NFL was who defenders feared the most? Well, at just 5'6", Darren Sproles was one of the toughest players to tackle in the NFL.
Darren Sproles off to the races. Touchdown, the little guy.
Most all-time yards in the history of our game in a season, Darren Sproles.
From getting college offers pulled when coaches realized how small he was, to being laughed at by scouts at the NFL Combine, Sproles' road to breaking records in the NFL was anything but easy. To figure out how he defied all the odds, we're gonna have to go back to when Sproles was actually huge. When Darren was born, he weighed a whopping 10 pounds. The first time his dad saw him, he thought he would be a lineman. That's how big he was. So the Sproles decided to give their newborn son a fitting nickname: Tank, which they still call him to this day. Darren started playing football at 8 years old. The very first time he touched the ball in his first ever game, he ran 80 yards for a touchdown. He was so fast. All he had to do was cut back and get to the outside, then he was gone. In his league, there was a 3-touchdown mercy rule. The problem was, if Darren touched the ball 3 times, he would score 3 touchdowns and the game would be over. So the administrator of the league called Darren's father and told him they would be typing up a memo that said his son would only be allowed to run in between the tackles and not on the outside. Yeah, Sproles was that good, the league literally had to change the rules for him. But while Darren was thriving on the gridiron, off it, things were difficult. He had a stutter, and because of it, he was relentlessly bullied. This resulted in Darren not really speaking at school. When Sproles got to high school, he didn't become his team's starting running back till his junior season. In his very first game as a starter, he rushed for an insane 326 yards and 4 touchdowns. The following year, as a senior, Sproles helped lead his team to a state championship by rushing for 2,485 yards and an unreal 49 touchdowns. 49 in just 12 games. Absolutely insane. In his 2 years as a starter, Darren racked up a total of 5,230 yards and 79 touchdowns. Despite putting up these absurd numbers, very few colleges were interested in recruiting the running back because of his size. At this point, Darren was barely 5'6" and weighed about 160 pounds. No one thought he would be able to play with the huge players on a Power 5 football team. However, a team in his home state of Kansas was interested. After seeing his film, the University of Kansas offered him a scholarship. But when Darren attended their camp a few months later, the coaches saw him in person for the first time and took away his offer when they realized how small he was. This just made the chip on the running back's shoulder even bigger. He knew he could thrive at a D1 level, he just needed someone to give him a chance. One team was willing to do this: Kansas State. They offered Sproles a full ride and he committed to the school. When Darren first arrived on campus, he was the 6th string running back. But after just 3 days of playing on the scout team, he was moved up to the 2nd string spot. As a sophomore, Sproles took over as the team's starting running back and turned heads. In the 13 games he played, he rushed for 1,465 yards and 17 touchdowns. But it was during his junior season when he truly became a superstar. That season, Darren led all FBS rushers with 1,986 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns, 287 receiving yards, and 2 receiving scores. At the end of the season, the 15th ranked Wildcats were set to play number 1 ranked Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship. Sproles went absolutely off in this game, racking up over 300 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns, which led Kansas State to a stunning 35-7 upset win. Following this historic year, the running back came in 5th for the Heisman Trophy Award. Darren was now thinking about leaving school early to declare for the NFL draft. Also guys, the NFL season is back, and you know I gotta get to a few Giants games, which is why I'm excited to tell you about my special hookup from today's sponsor, SeatGeek. Everyone can use my code SheGotSports10 to get 10% off any tickets on SeatGeek. Whether you're a new customer or not, sports, festivals, concerts, you name it, they got it. Tickets are rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. No matter how many times you've bought tickets using SeatGeek before, code SheGotSports10 is going to get you 10% off your next purchase. So take out your phone, open the SeatGeek app, and add code SheGotSports10 to your account. Do Do it now, guys, because this offer is only going to be around for a limited time. But even after putting up some of the best numbers in college football, evaluators told him he wouldn't be drafted before the 4th round. Sproles also made a promise to his mom that he would get his college degree. And unfortunately, at the end of his junior year, she passed away from cancer. So Darren knew he had to go back to school and keep the promise he made her. Kansas State lost a ton of starters entering Sproles' senior year, so the team wasn't as good. Despite having a down year, Darren finished his college career with the 6th most all-purpose yards in NCAA history and the 11th most rushing yards. After graduating with his degree in speech pathology, it was time for the running back to declare for the 2005 NFL Draft. However, at the scouting combine, things didn't go as planned. When it was time for Darren to go up and get his height recorded, he measured in at just 5'6". Some of the scouts, coaches, and owners in attendance started laughing at him. They were literally laughing at this man right in front of his face. That night, Sproles called his father and said, "Dad, they laughed at me, but I'm going to make sure they know who I am." When the time came for Darren to go through the combine drills, he did just that. He showed off his blazing speed and ridiculous strength in spite of his small stature. He ran a 4.47 40-yard dash, which was the 4th fastest out of all the running backs there, and on the bench press, he repped 225 pounds, which was more than 30 pounds heavier than him 23 times, which yet again was the 4th most out of all the running backs in attendance. Scouts told Sproles if he was just 3 inches taller, he would have been a first-round pick. When draft day arrived, Darren didn't hear his name called in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round. But then, with the 130th overall pick in the 4th round, the San Diego Chargers drafted him. He ended up being the 14th running back selected in the draft. As soon as Darren was drafted, he became the shortest player ever in the NFL's modern Super Bowl era. The only player shorter than him was Jack Shapiro, who stood at just 5'1" and played 1 game for the Staten Island Stapletons in 1929. Sproles spent his rookie season as the Chargers' 3rd-string running back behind future Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson and Michael Turner. He only got 8 carries the entire season, but the running back carved out a role for himself on special teams as an excellent returner. However, things didn't go the way Darren would have hoped the following season. He broke his ankle during the preseason and missed all of 2007. Entering 2008, Darren was San Diego's 2nd-string running back. In week 11 of that season, Sproles returned the game's opening kickoff 89 yards for his first ever NFL touchdown. Then, just a few minutes later in the 1st quarter, he returned a punt 46 yards for yet another score. A few weeks after that versus the Lions, Sproles rushed for over 100 yards for the first time in his pro career, and on top of that scored his first 2 non-special teams touchdowns. In 2008, 4 years after being drafted, Sproles really began to make a name for himself. In just the 2nd game of that season, he became only the 2nd player in NFL history to have over 50 rushing yards, 50 receiving yards, and 100 return yards in a single game. However, his real breakout performance didn't come till the playoffs. In the Chargers' final game of the regular season, LaDainian Tomlinson tore his groin. He tried to play in the team's wildcard game the following week, but after his 5th carry, he was ruled out. So now Sproles was the lead back for the 8-8 Chargers, who were trying to pull off a big upset versus Peyton Manning and the 12-4 Colts. But Darren was up for the challenge. He played probably the best game of his pro career thus far, ripping off big run after big run, using his shiftiness and power, and also wasn't afraid to throw some really nice blocks. At the end of regulation, the score was knotted at 17, so to OT they went. Then, Darren rushed 22 yards for the walk-off game-winning touchdown. He finished the game with 105 rushing yards, 45 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. It was during this game that Darren showed the league his size didn't matter. He could flat out ball. In 2009, Sproles had the strongest season of his career thus far. Keyword thus far. He had 840 yards from scrimmage and 8 total touchdowns. After putting up similar numbers for the Chargers in 2010, Drew Brees, San Diego's quarterback from Sproles' rookie season, called him up and asked him to come join him in New Orleans. So prior to the 2011 season, Darren signed a 4-year, $14 million deal with the Saints. Sproles started his time as a Saint with a bang. In his first game for the team, 2015, he returned a punt for a touchdown and had 7 receptions for 75 yards. 3 weeks later, he got the start at running back and rushed for 75 yards while averaging over 10 yards per carry and caught 5 passes for 56 yards. Darren used his size to his advantage. After getting the handoff, it was hard for defenders to see him behind the offensive lineman. Then when he did finally pop out, it was extremely hard to tackle him because he was so shifty. And oh yeah, he wasn't afraid to get physical and lower the shoulder too. Teammates said pound for pound, he was the strongest guy on the team. Sproles' best game of the season came in week 7. In that one, he had 88 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown, as well as 19 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Including his return yardage on special teams, he finished the game with 190 all-purpose yards. Once the playoffs arrived, Darren took his play to another level yet again. In the Saints wildcard game, he had over 30 receiving yards, 50 rushing yards, and scored 2 touchdowns. Then, in the next round versus the 49ers, he had an insane 15 receptions for 118 receiving yards and a touchdown, but the team ultimately lost that one 36-32. 2011 turned out to be a historic season for the running back. He finished the year with 2,696 all-purpose yards, which broke the NFL's single-season record. The next 2 seasons, Sproles put up similar stats for New Orleans. However, in March of 2014, the Saints traded the running back to the Eagles for a 5th-round pick. Drew Brees was sad to see his teammate go and said, quote, "You only see a Darren Sproles type of player come around once in your career." In his first game as an Eagle, Darren sparked the team's 17-point comeback by rushing for a 49-yard touchdown score in the 3rd quarter. Then in the very next game, he had a career-best 7 receptions for 152 receiving yards and a touchdown, which won him the NFC Offensive Player of the Week award. Sproles finished 2014 with 716 yards from scrimmage and 6 touchdowns. As a punt returner, he had 506 yards, which was the most in the NFL that season, and 2 touchdowns. For his performance on special teams that season, he was named a Pro Bowler for the first time in his career and a 2nd-team All-Pro. Despite his success in 2014, there were questions surrounding how much playing time Sproles would get in 2015. You see, during the offseason, Philadelphia went out and signed the NFL's leading rusher, DeMarco Murray, as well as the Chargers' starting running back, Ryan Matthews. So it looked like Sproles would be the 3rd-string running back on the depth chart. However, in the first game of the season, Murray had 8 carries for just 9 yards, while Matthews had 3 carries for only 4 yards. Meanwhile, Darren was the most effective running back, racking up 50 yards with just 5 carries and hauling in 7 catches for 76 yards. So Sproles made it clear he was still deserving of playing time despite the additions to the backfield. For a 2nd consecutive season, Darren was the NFL's leading punt returner and was named a Pro Bowl as well as a 1st-team All-Pro. Sproles started the 2016 season as one of rookie quarterback Carson Wentz's favorite targets out of the backfield. He racked up nearly 900 yards from scrimmage that season and almost 300 additional yards as a returner, which resulted in him being named to his 3rd consecutive Pro Bowl. However, in 2017, things took a turn for the worse. In a Week 3 matchup with the Giants, Sproles tore his ACL and broke his arm on the same play, which ended his season. The Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl that year too. At 35 years old, Darren decided to return to the Eagles for his 14th pro season. To understand just how insane this is, the average career length of a running back is less than 3 years. That's the shortest out of all the positions in football. Sproles' longevity was something we rarely see from running backs. After returning from his ACL injury in Week 1, he hurt his hamstring in practice prior to Week 2 and missed the majority of the 2018 season. Darren re-signed with Philly heading into 2019 and got the start at running back in Week 1. In Week 5, he moved into 5th place on the NFL's all-time all-purpose yards list. However, during that game, he partially tore his hip flexor muscle. He returned to the field 3 weeks later, but ended up fully tearing the muscle in his first game back. This injury didn't just end Sproles' season. It ended his career. At the end of 2019, the running back announced he would be retiring after 15 pro seasons. Even years after his retirement, Sproles still holds multiple NFL records. He has the most combined all-purpose yards in a 2-game playoff span with 602. He still holds the record for the most all-purpose yards in a single season and has the most receiving touchdowns by a player shorter than 5'7" with 32. Darren really paved the way for shorter players in the NFL. In 2010, 5'5" returner Trent Brendan Holiday was drafted in the 6th round by the Broncos, and in 2023, 5'5" running back Deuce Vaughn was also drafted in the 5th round by the Cowboys. Despite his playing days being over, Sproles is still involved with the league. He currently is a personal consultant in the Eagles football operations department. When both Carson Wentz and Darren Sproles were out with season-ending injuries during the Eagles' Super Bowl run, Sproles actually had to confront Carson for being a bad teammate and basically being upset with the team's success without him. If you want to hear more about that crazy story, check out this video up here about Carson Wentz.